Hi, I'm Robin Imbrogno with the Human Resource Consulting Group. In this podcast, you'll hear about 4 risks that you may face in your practice with human resources or human resource related issues. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to another Aligner Insider podcast.
Hello, everybody in podcast land. This is Dean Steinman and Dr. Barry Glazer, and we are back with another Aligner Insider podcast. How are you today, Dr. G?
I am doing fine, Dean. Thanks for asking. It's some parts of the country getting a snowstorm, but sun's shining here. Not too bad. It is last day of January.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yep. January 31st. Got to double check that.
It is, and it's been quick beginning of the year so far. So, we're in the middle of 2023 has just started, and we're in the middle of a lot of stuff going on in the industry. And we have a special guest today that we're excited to have. That's good. That everybody should be listening and knowing this information. So we have Robin Imbrogno, and Robin is the CEO and founder of Human Resources Consulting Group, and we're going to talk today about 4 potential human resources risks practice might be facing and what you need to do in order to get on board, be compliant, whatever it is. So Robin, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure. So before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Robin, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
So I have run and managed the Human Resource Consulting Group for about 34 years. We're based here in Connecticut. I spend part of my life in Connecticut, part of my life in Vermont, and just enjoy working with people. And when I'm not here, I'm usually found someplace on a mountain skiing, though the Northeast was not the place to be this year.
I have a lot of friends that I don't ski, but I have a lot of friends that do, and they're all complaining about it. But I guess that's why everybody's going out to Utah and out west in order to enjoy the powder there. So, so tell us how did you get into the human resources industry?
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone grows up and says that's what I want to be, but I think I did. I knew I sort of wanted to be in consulting, but I didn't even know what that was when I had identified it. But I've just always enjoyed working with people. I started in training, what was known back then as HRD, Human Resource Development, and build training, technical training, actually, what was first known as web-based training, and then migrated over into human resources and started this firm right out of my master's program. I'm grateful that I still have the first couple of folks that we graduated our master's program with, and they're still employed with us today. So, it's been a good ride.
Oh, that's great. So, I run a company and I've got employees. Dr. Glazer has employees. Most dental practices with dental practices have employees. So, and I know it's very difficult to keep up to snuff with things as far as having, employee handbooks and as far as training. And, I remember, everybody had to take, sexual harassment training, and to take HIPAA training and this training and that training and this up to dates or whatever. So, let's start with, as mentioned, let's talk about 4 potential risks that a practice might be facing in 2023 and what needs to be done in order to make sure that you can sleep at night. All right. So when it comes to, in my eyes, HR, when human resource employees, the backbone of any business is the employees. Okay. And Barry, you correct if I'm wrong, but your staff makes or breaks your office, makes or breaks any business.
Absolutely.
So what would you say, Robin, first off, the number one issue that a business owner faces when dealing with HR?
Yeah, so it's an interesting time right now. I think this sort of, I won't call it post-COVID because we're all dealing with COVID, but I think since COVID is somewhat quieted down, or the fear of COVID is quieted down, what we're seeing now is an incredible amount of legislation. So, and it's affecting smaller businesses. So it's really come downstream. So what we're seeing now are organizations that are under 50 that used to be somewhat exempt. So the mom and pop orthodontia office, the groups that never had to worry about legislation before now have that landscape that they really do need to worry about. We had extensive legislation passed in the summer of 22, the fall of 22, January of 23, things that you would never have to worry about in the past. And then the federal government passed some sweeping legislation just in January that, again, many of you who are probably listening to today, including you, through Barry, are probably going to have to worry about too. So things
like such as what's one thing that as a business owner or practice owner, and have a staff that you should work that is going to be on the horizon we have to worry about?
So two pieces of legislation that just passed, the Pregnancy and Lactation Accommodation Act. So nationwide, Pregnant Workers Fairness Act passed. 15 or more employees, you must provide a reasonable accommodation to help women who are pregnant at childbirth or have any kind of related medical conditions, which sounds sort of simple at first, but that reasonable accommodation piece means that you have to go through an interactive process, the same that you would have to go through with ADA. Yeah. And with that was also passed the PUMP Act, which means that you have to provide moms that are lactating a reasonable break time in a private location, which again, for small employers that may not have this space. So if your practice doesn't have a private room, you're going to have to figure that out for up to 1 year post-child.
What if you're under 15 employees? Do you exempt?
So 15 and over is for the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. The PUMP Act actually goes for all employers. But if you're under 50 and you can prove that it would be a significant impact to your business or an undue hardship, which isn't always easy to prove, then you could become exempt. But remember, proving that may be just as difficult as providing the exemption. So, but yes, on the reasonable accommodation side, you could be exempt. But
interesting.
Need something to prove.
Oh boy, all right. And so now we've got this legislation. What else is something that we need to worry about? Where do you want to continue on that?
I just wanted to share that that's the federal side, but many states equally have provided similar legislation in the last year. So Connecticut came up with its own, New York has come up with its own, and several other states. So you're not just keeping up with what's happening nationally, you now have to worry about what's happening at a state level.
Is the government subsidize this, or is this on you to build this out and pay for it?
So you got to make sure you look at that, because some are unpaid, some are paid, right? So some are unpaid time while they're taking a break, and some are requiring paid time.
So as far as building out the room, if you need privacy room, is this also something that you get as a grant, or do you have to build this?
That's on you.
That's on you also. Interesting. Okay. All right. Luckily, I'm remote. And what about if people are? This is only actually in an office setting. Some practices and businesses have remote people. Some of the TC is remote or staff is remote. So does this affect people that are remote as well, or only on site?
Just the time for remote employees, just the time.
Okay. Got it.
But it can't be a bathroom. All of the states that have passed this, as well as the federal legislation, state specifically that it has to be private space. And it cannot be a bathroom.
Jeez. Wow. Okay. If you're ready to take your practice to the next level, look no further than ortho marketing. Our team of experts is here to help you connect with your target audience and achieve your practice goals through powerful online marketing strategies. With our innovative approach to digital marketing, we help you boost your online visibility and get you real results. From a one-man practice to a large office, we have the resources and experience to create a digital marketing strategy that's tailored to your practice. Don't wait any longer. Let Ortho Marketing help you excel in the digital world. Contact us today and let us start your digital journey together. Orthomarketing.com. Interesting. All right. And when did this come into effect? This was
Federal was 1/1.
okay. When this year. So brand spanking new. Okay. Interesting.
Great.
All right. So you have the Pump Act. What else does a practice or business owner need to know about as far as an HR change or something for not moving forward?
Paid leave is all over for all sizes of businesses. So 13 states have passed through paid leave. Some are employer paid, some are employee paid. There is a national push right now to have a national program as well. So if you haven't looked recently, you should to see if your state's been included. Colorado, Oregon, DC passed 1/1 legislation to begin in the future, but 11 other states had passed in 2022, including Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, so many others. 2 have voluntary programs, meaning employees can volunteer to opt in, but expect to see that wave continuing. Those are all around 12 weeks with additional, some have additional 2 weeks for prenatal or complications around maternity leave. So expect to continue to see that, and know that most of them continue have some kind of wording that if they are employee paid to begin, if those programs become bankrupt, you can expect to be contributing something at some point.
Boy, interesting. All right. And what constitutes the Paid Leave Act? Is that what are the parameters from that?
Yeah, good question. So many of them are starting without. So some of you may be familiar with things like family medical leave, which was a national program for for larger employers, 75 and more. But these numbers are much lower. So as an example, Connecticut is 1 employee or more. And that's what most of these are, right? So these are not going to 15 or more or 4 or more.
1 employee.
Many of them are starting at 1 employee or more. So, again, they're going up to 12 weeks. Many of them don't require an employee to have any time worked for you, just having had some time working for prior employers. So they have some money built up in their paid program.
Good. All right. What is another risk that a practice could face? Obviously, they need to know about the 2 new legislations. Is there anything that's been out there for a year or 2 that people might not know about that they really should?
A lot going on the wage side. So keep an eye on wage transparency. Again, these are things that many of you are probably feeling. There's been a lot of wage compression because of changes in, salary rates have obviously gone up significantly. Minimum wages have gone up. Years ago, you just had to worry about 50 state minimum wages. In 2003, we only had 2 states that had individual locals that had different rates. So you had 50 states and 2 locals. Today, there are 85 different locals along with the 50 states.
Well,
so forget about the federal government having its own minimum wage. You have the federal, 50 states, 85 locals, and then on top of that, you have all of this change going on. So employers like yourselves, small businesses, are really challenged, if you will, by trying to maintain some kind of sanity around what to pay people. But there's a little bit of good news for you, especially for those of you getting into your industry. So I did a little bit of background to see, there's been around a 30% increase in pay scales over the last 10 years. But your specific industry has kept up with that. You're around 27%. So while the top of the puppy pile has been sales and middle management in general, Your specific profession is kept right up there. You're around 27, 28%. That said, we're starting to back off of those high changes in salaries for 2023. That doesn't mean that it won't be a problem for you this year at all, because you're still seeing some changes in internal equity and wage compression overall within your staff. So you're still going to feel, I think, some of that overall. You're looking at budget increases somewhere around 3.5% this year. So I think that will continue to be an issue for you too. But keep an eye, very close eye to something called wage transparency laws that really are sweeping across the country. There's been about 22 states that have passed laws. Some are much more active, some are passive. What that means is that you have to make disclosures. And again, these are going right down to mom and pop. Some are, 50 and more, but most are going right down to small employers, where you have to let people know what the ranges are for the jobs that they're applying for, getting promoted into. So if you hire someone to work at the reception desk in your practice, if you hire someone to work as an orthodonture assistant, you have to, when you post a job, tell people what the pay range is. You have to let them know if they're being promoted into an office manager, what that range is. And you have to keep, if you're in Colorado, you now have to keep job description, as well as notify them what the benefits are for that job and any bonuses that might be eligible for that job. And you have to keep those for a number of years. Oh. So wage transparency, pay equity has really changed in the last few years. So be careful. It's not just about minimum wage anymore and about where all of that is going. It's really a whole new world. So,
can I jump in here for a second? So I have a family member who's, in the market, looking to change jobs. She's in the health and beauty industry. And, she goes through these ridiculous, in my mind, months long, multiple interviews, on and on and on. But I know, but at some point, 2, 3, 4 interviews in, she, for one of these it was a large cosmetics company. And at some point he said, we've been having a lot of interviews. I wanted to have a conversation a little bit about how much you pay, right? How much you pay. And she was scolded, and really dressed down by the woman that was interviewing her, that's a inappropriate question. That's not a question that you should ever ask on an interview. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm so glad I'm not in the corporate world, because like I said, it's meeting after meeting after interview. And then on top of everything else, then they ghost her. And this has happened 3 or 4, maybe 5 times where she's in the running, and then nobody has the courtesy to send an email to say, thank you very much, we picked somebody else. So, what you're saying is interesting, but I don't see that happening, at least, maybe they pick on the little guys, but I don't see that happening in corporate America.
Well, it could be a training issue, but 20 states, so that's almost half of our states right now, have some type of wage transparency protections. So that either means that they're not educating their managers, right? And trust me, if they're going to go after, if the wage and hour divisions of these states are going to go after someone, they're going to go after the big boys before they come after you, right? So they're going to go after whoever has the deep pockets first, and make a point of them. But then they're going to come after the little guys too. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, California, Colorado, actually have made, even Illinois. Illinois is making people get a license going forward in 2024 for pay rate certifications. Colorado is making California rather is making people with 100 schools or more send in their pay rates to the Civil Rights Bureau in California. So there's some crazy things happening. California. So they may not know now, but they will.
Right. So it sounds like to me, so, if any of the doctors that are listening to this podcast, before they put an ad out on, I don't know if people still use Craigslist or Indeed or wherever it is, they really need to speak to somebody, because just the body of that ad already could be a violation of the law, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How does somebody stay compliant? And do they let's talk about specifically, orthodontic practice, dental practice? Is it generally the doctor who does it, the office manager? So in theory, I guess it falls on your shoulders, Barry. But then you would have to decide if it's something that you would do, or you'd have to make sure that it's handled by somebody else in the office. But either you or your office manager or what have you. How do you stay compliant to know what you need to do? So
you're asking me. I mean, I think
ask Rob. Ask Robin on that, because obviously you would know, unless you are handling this yourself and you are up to snuff on it.
You make sure that you ask the pros.
Exactly. Right. So what would you suggest, Robin, as far as somebody to stay compliant? Because there's so many different compliances that you need to adhere to. So what's the best way to keep up to snuff with what's going on, or to be informed?
It's so different today, right, than it was even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was simple. You would look at federal law. The states might have a few laws, and that was it. So, a business owner could do it. A practice manager could do it. An office manager could do it. You can't do it today. There are two. We have people. We have almost 50 employees, and we have nationwide clients that we manage, and we have full-time people that just keep up with compliance law. That's all they do. Because you can't possibly know everything you need to know to run a business anymore. So if you don't have an HR professional, you need to have either paying an attorney, or you're paying a third party, or you have to use some kind of an outside resource. It was very viable to have someone inside years ago that you could maybe trust to do your payroll, or look something up. You just can't anymore. It's just too complex. There are too many, and no one. It used to be the federal government was the leader, and then the states would follow. Maybe California would be a leader. Connecticut would always follow California. It's not that way anymore. It's everyone is vying to be the most protected. California still, of course, is a country in and of itself. They actually have a separate certification in our industry because it's so complex in and of itself. But you've got states like Colorado jumping out of the box now with its own set of complexities. And New York acts, the southern part of New York is dramatically different than the upper state of New York.
Of course it is.
Right. How, what is priority? Is it federal or state or local, or is it all three just as important?
Is whatever is most beneficial for the employee. So,
and that's determined by who?
Quite frankly, it's wherever you're getting, wherever you get sued by.
Terrific.
It's you have to have a policy that addresses all three, and you need to be able to blend all three to take the best of each, the most beneficial of each for that employee. So one part of legislation provides something that's good for an employee, and a local happens to have something that's better than the federal. You're going to take the federal, then the local, and if the state has another piece that's most beneficial, you'll blend those three, which get incredibly confusing.
Sure. So what's the best, one bit of advice you could give to a practice listening in order for them to get on board, to become compliant, to not get sued? Because things are constantly changing, and they come out of the woodwork from, all different aspects. So whether seeing a help wanted ad to, to somebody that, just had a baby, to paid leave, etc. So what's the one bit of advice you could give to somebody to understand all this?
Yeah, I mean, they need to either seek out someone who can assist them, part-time basis, on-call basis, as needed, whatever it might be. Make sure it's someone who understands the legal aspects of what's happening in their environment, somebody who has access to changing laws within their environment. These subscriptions are not inexpensive, so you want to make sure that you're talking to someone who has access, isn't just using Google. That would be like going to someone, like you all that don't go for continuing education and all of those things, because it's critical that you stay at the top of your game, because if you don't, you'll be behind. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you all about were handbooks, right? What keeps you up at night. An outdated handbook is useless, right? And you used to be able to get away with having a handbook that you could update every couple of years. Not anymore. In our industry, you're now looking at updating a handbook at least quarterly. If you were in California, you might want to update it monthly.
Wow, jeez.
And
when you update it, do you add an addendum, or do you have to redo the whole thing?
An addendum is fine. I would make it as fluid as it's more important that you do it than how you do it. And don't get crazy about having somebody sign it every time that they do it. You can do it by purely an electronic acknowledgement. Doesn't have to be a wet signature.
Nope.
Some of you may use something called an HCM technology, where you do your payroll, that might have these kinds of features built into it. If you don't, you should look at those that make it easy to just push it out through your system and have them just check off, that they've viewed it or accepted it. That's the easiest way to do it. And then you can, once a year, either have them acknowledge it through signature, or even if something big, gets pushed through, change of PTO time, something like that.
Yeah, it's great advice. I just want to jump in here. I suppose if maybe you're an orthodontist and you're part of an OSO or DSO, and there's 50 or 100 practices, maybe, some of those businesses are large enough to have, on-site HR departments. But for me, a solo practitioner, working with Robin's company has been a godsend, because I basically have access to a professional, it's my own personal professional HR department, just when I need it, so Robin's there when the office needs me. And I think it's just a great way to go, because you can absolutely positively cannot do it yourself. And I don't know if any orthodontists try to do it themselves, but orthodontists get all bent out of shape when patients try to do that on orthodontics, but then they think they're going to save a buck and try to figure all this stuff out on their own.
Exactly.
After over 30 years, 35 years of experience, I think that just goes to show that, you want to work with the people that know what they're doing to help to protect you and your practice and your employees.
Yeah. Well, Robin, this was great information, and everybody, take this to heart. You can't ignore this. If you don't be compliant, there's a very good chance you can get sued. Plain and simple. So you want to make sure that you're compliant and keep up to date with things. Technology's changing, legislation is always changing. Laws are always changing, and your staff is your bloodline. They're your backbones. You have to make sure that you're on board and you are doing the best you can for them, and you're following all the rules. And the rule list keeps getting bigger and bigger. So, Robert, if somebody has any questions or wants to get more information from you, or what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you?
Sure. I mean, they can go to our website and reach out to us through that. It's the Human Resource Consulting Group, www.thehumanresourceconsultinggroup.com. They can email me directly, Robin at hr-consulting-group.com. Either way is fine. You can call. We don't use voicemail. It's 203-881-1755. So you can get us anytime. We're open 8:30 to 7 p.m. Every day. So
great. Well, thanks so much for this information. Appreciate everybody out there, podcast land. Thank you so much for being a part of the Aligner Insider family. We hopefully you're going to get some great information from here. Please take this to heart. This is so important here. So, Barry, any final thoughts on keeping up the snuff here, or anything that Rob had to say?
Yeah. So, Dean and I always try to have at least one throwback moment. And I don't remember. Used to be these commercials for Fram oil filters. and it was like the best slogan ever. You can pay me now, or you can
later.
later. I think whoever came up with that slogan, it was brilliant because they sort of like broached the subject of money. And I think it's the same thing here. I said you can invest, in Robin's services, or you could pay, Uncle Sam later, possibly tens or hundred thousands of dollars in fines. So but I always loved that commercial. I thought that was like the best slogan.
Well said. Yep, I remember like it was yesterday. It's great. So Robin, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it, everybody. Thanks so much. Reach out to Robin with any questions you have. Should be a great opportunity, resource for you, and that's something you really need to do. So everybody in podcast land, thanks so much. This is Dean and Barry, the Insiders, signing off now, and we look forward to making you smile down the road. Everybody, be happy, keep smiling.